Welcome, everyone, to Buddhist Center. This evening, we're fortunate to be here discussing the Dharma. We're fortunate that Buddha Shakyamuni came into our world around 2,500 years ago out of great compassion to show us how to get everything that we want. And it's up until that time, there hadn't been anyone who came into the world and showed us how to get exactly what we want. It had just never happened before that. And Buddha Shakyamuni had discovered this truth, which was there for everyone to discover. And he was so kind to come and show us exactly what we needed to do in order to get exactly what we want. And what is it that we want? If we all think about it, day and night, what are we trying to have occur? We're trying to be free from suffering, and we're trying to be as happy as possible. That's what we do, literally all day and night, and then we go to sleep. And then all day and night, we try to not suffer, in all these different ways. Think about all the ways in your life you try to not suffer, medicines, going to die, all these things which don't work inevitably in the end because you can't stop it. You try, but you can't. So you go through your day trying to not suffer. This is one of our jobs that we feel is so important. We go through this day and we try to not suffer, and we fail miserably, usually, but we're able to fool ourselves into thinking we're playing some sort of chess, and we can, we could have some sort of pleasant mix. So then we could enjoy the good times. So we justify the fact that we're out of control and say, this is what really gets me to relish a day off, is having to work 19 in a row, right? If you worked in restaurants, this is good. This is what really allows me to have that one day where I can do my laundry, right? So we tell ourselves these lies, and all day we're doing this stuff to try to not have suffering occur, but it keeps occurring. And this is what had happened and will continue to happen to everybody up until the Buddha taught how to be free from suffering. There was no solution, and this is just what everybody did. And then the Buddha came, and only a few people bought into it. So here we are. What are we going to do now? Only, you look around, most people aren't buying into the fact that there's something other than all of the things that you would think about you do to not suffer. Most people would agree that's what you do to not suffer. You do what you do. You do all this stuff, and then you don't suffer as much as you think you would have had you not done that stuff. But all the while, it's just discontent. And when, as I was saying, and I was telling the eye doctor today, and I think he may be a Buddhist now, tonight, I was saying I was watching this documentary on humankind and how it evolved and how we went from, the ice ages and only having fire and no wheels and, et cetera, up to the point where we're pretty comfortable with iPhones and so forth. And this documentary wasn't a Buddhist documentary. It was a scientific documentary. It was a documentary that showed that humans' desire for comfort and discontent with the amount of comfort that they currently had caused us to go from to an iPhone. And an iPhone 16's right on the way. I think we're in 15 because we were just doing phone stuff. It's the only reason I know. I think 15, maybe 16's out, and I'm way out of the loop. But we're still deciding we aren't comfortable. We're still like, oh, did you see now we have this lighting that's like a little like less da-da-da-da, and it's nicer on your eye. I mean, we're still trying to create any tiny bit of a turn we can to be more comfortable because we're just suffering all the time. We're so unsatisfied all of the time. So we just do what we do. We keep making more external things because we think that external things is what works. We think that external things will end our suffering, so we just keep going. We keep going. And we never look at what is actually causing our discontent, which is our mind. We look at external factors, which are innumerable, And we have this one internal factor that's creating our reaction to all of it. Yet, as intelligent as we are, we still look outside and try and figure out why we can't be happy. So the Buddha came to the world out of such great compassion and kindness to tell us exactly why we have this suffering that doesn't end. Why are you so discontented? Well, suffering has a cause, the Buddha came to tell us, and we're so lucky that the Buddha came to tell us this. And then what else do we do all day? We look for as much happiness as possible. So we don't want to suffer. So we have all this stuff. We're putting fires out all day. Now we took not only the glasses, my eyes are going down. I got some new glasses, but we went to the oil change and the seal on the oil pump is gone. And, it's like a lot of money. And we were all excited because we have free oil changes for life in the particular car that we have that we were, family members letting us use. So we think we're really winning. Going to the place, like we're going to knock all this work out in one thing, and come to find out that it's thousands of dollars worth of work that is going to be due on this car, and all the while we're just going at this life thinking that we're grabbing, the most we can out of it. And that's the problem. We're trying to get it out of it instead of finding it here in our minds, where the most peaceful place is, the most loving, compassion, most powerful place is, right in our mind. But we look everywhere else but our mind. So all we want to do is have as much happiness as possible. We do whatever it takes to get as much happiness as possible. We think, oh my gosh, if I can become a doctor, that'll make me the happiest as possible. And we're literally willing to put in 12 years plus 4 years plus 4 years plus 4. All of these years to become this thing that we think will make us happy, the kind of happy that we're looking for, not just like we should be happy. Because the Buddha said the real sickness is that we can have everything we need and we're still so discontented. So we're just trying to become happier and happier and happier, and it's not working. Why? Because it's a contaminated situation we're living in. That all of our feelings of happiness are just suffering. They're bait. They're going to change into something that's just excruciating. Yet we don't believe it, and we chase it and think it's going to be what makes us the most happy in the universe. We think that that's it. That's going to be our answer. And unfortunately, it hasn't proven to be true. It hasn't been proven to be true for me in almost 52 years. And I tried so many different ways. It's incredible. And had so many opportunities to enjoy the splendors of cyclic existence. And all it came up in the end was suffering, salt water, dissatisfaction, craving more. And then when the more wasn't working, then craving not, and not being able to get away from more. Think about this in our lives. When we just think that anything other than where we're at exactly now is what we really need. And if we could figure out what's going on right now in our minds and find that place that's totally peaceful, totally fearless, totally blissful, and not look at things the way that we look at them, that creates this mess. We see that it's from the self-grasping ignorance that we first of all believe that I and everything around me inherently exists. And then based on this untruth, I then respond. My mind responds to an untruth. If you're told a lie and you believe it, your mind responds to an untruth and believes it in a simple sense. And then responding to this untruth says, okay, if I inherently exist and the things around me inherently exist, then I need to do some thinking about what I find pleasurable, pleasant, what I find unpleasant, What I will allow just around me is neutral. And my mind starts to investigate which things fall into these categories, because all of them are truly existent. So they need categories. They need to, since I'm truly existent and mine, I and mine. So, Dharmakirti in the Pramanavartika Karika says if there's this real attachment to the I, then there'll be this attachment to the mind, and not seeing a fault in this view will never get rid of the cause of attachment. And this is what differentiates the Buddhist tradition, view-wise, from other traditions, is the fact that there is one very specific thing that gives rise to all of our problems: the grasping at the I as being truly existent, grasping at phenomena as being truly existent. As soon as there's this I and mine, there's this attachment to I and mine, then with this faulty view, there's no cause to get rid of attachment. So what does that mean? The cause that brings about attachment is self-grasping ignorance. There's no cause to end attachment if self-grasping ignorance is there. So it's so profound that we see this clear differentiation. So many traditions say, don't be attached, suppress attachment. But in the Buddhist tradition, there's a deeper layer that says this is where the attachment is coming from. You don't need to pay a penance. You don't need to harm your body. You don't need to do all of these other things that make your attachment suppress. Just thinking of things as dirty all day and suppressing your attachment, or thinking, oh, these things don't have you in them, suppressing your attachment. You have to get at what exactly is causing the attachment to occur. And we see there's two layers below coarse afflictions, two layers below attachment. So without a blueprint, without a roadmap that shows us how to get rid of the attachment, just saying get rid of attachment or suppressing attachment is like having a bush outside with poisonous leaves that cause a rash for you, and you cut a few of the leaves off because you walk by it, and you cut a foot of the leaves away from you off so that when you walk by it, it doesn't harm you. You've merely suppressed the plant. It's going to grow back and then harm you again. That's the differentiation. If you aren't getting to the root of what is causing the problem and you're just suppressing it, it'll come back. So what do you do in the case where you have this bush that has these leaves that keep growing back, that keep causing you a rash? Don't prune the bush, cut it from the root. Don't prune the bush, cut it from the root. What is the root in this case? The root is the self-grasping ignorance that then gives rise to inappropriate attention, that then gives rise to attachment, aversion, ignorance, that then gives rise to us acting in contaminated ways. And contaminated actions give rise to contaminated results. Samsara. So the Buddha was so kind to come to this world to clarify what we really needed to do. Dharmakirti says, you alone taught the Four Noble Truths. What does this mean? You showed us that what suffering is, and the things that you don't even think are suffering, and then showed us exactly what causes it, and then showed how to get rid of it forever. And this is the first time that this had ever been taught. Ever. And what that means, that the I and phenomena are not truly existent, are not inherently existent, are not intrinsically existent, don't exist by way of their own character, don't exist right within the object, don't objectively exist. Those are a lot of words that you can throw around. But if you don't understand what the object of negation is an object being able to stand on its own, and you don't understand that it's not intrinsically one with its parts, and it's not intrinsically separate from its parts, and if it's not intrinsically one or intrinsically separate from its parts, then it's necessarily not objectively existent. So we have to look at what these four essentials are, these proofs, what the entailment of emptiness is, and then see for ourselves if this makes any sense. See if the way that things appear to us are tally with reality. And the only way that we can do that is by checking if they tally with reality, checking. And how do we check? We check with the mirror of the Dharma. And how do we have any idea or any clue? It's because Buddha was so kind, the one who transformed into the reliable guide, motivated by altruism to benefit sentient beings, the teacher, Sugata, and protector. To you I make prostrations. Dignaga in the Pramana Samuccaya made this incredible homage that then Dharmakirti wrote all those stanzas about in the second chapter of the Pramana Vartika Karika. The one who eliminated the web of conceptualizations and endowed with the divine bodies of the vast and profound, who eternally shines forth the forever noble light rays. To you, the Buddha, I make prostrations. And then Dharmakirti wrote that verse and then wrote hundreds of stanzas to explain that one Dignaga quote. And the Buddha, because of this motivation, this altruism of wanting to take on himself, herself, the task, in Buddha Shakyamuni's case, himself, the task of freeing all sentient beings from suffering and bringing them to a state of happiness, he came and turned the wheel of Dharma. So before we go any further, I just want to say that let's start to set our motivation where we invite all beings to be here, to be our guests. And we'll say in the language of the gods, nagas, and yaksas, in the language of demons and humans too, in the language of however many kinds of speech there may be, I shall proclaim the Dharma in the language of all. So we think about why we're here tonight. We think about what brought us to Buddhism, what questions we had unanswered, what we really, came to find out. We ended up here somehow or another. I know many of you were with Khensa Geshe Wandak Rinpoche for so many years. We're so blessed to have had him teaching us week after week after week. Wherever it was that you showed up, whenever you showed up, there were questions that you had. And at the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, Buddha was so kind to give most of the answers to the questions that I had when I came here. I was so dissatisfied. This dissatisfaction that I was talking about was, before we got started, was eating away at me. And I just couldn't pinpoint it. This kind of hum of discontent, I just couldn't pinpoint. And the facts that I was being given about why I was here and how I got here just didn't seem to make any sense to me. And if my condition didn't make any sense to me, and why my condition was the way that it was didn't make any sense to me, it left me in a place of discomfort a lot of times, that I tried to fill, this discomfort, change this discomfort with external things. And it didn't seem to go away. This discomfort, this dissatisfaction, this chasing, this, drinking salt water and wondering why I'm so thirsty and so thirsty and so thirsty. I don't know why. I don't know why. I really didn't know why, but I knew there was a reason. And I, as even a very young child, had so many questions that none of the adults around me could answer. But then I picked up a book on Buddhism, and it mentioned these Four Noble Truths that the Buddha first turned, the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. And within a page or two, it all made sense. It was presented in a very summarized, beautiful way. And the Buddha lays out this idea that this is the truth of suffering. And it sounds like, oh, life is suffering. I know that that's the buzz thing to say about, well, Buddha said life is suffering. Well, I mean, that really needs to be clarified, because Buddha's life is not suffering. And Buddha has a life. Buddha Shakyamuni has a life. Buddha Shakyamuni's life is not suffering. Anyone who's achieved arhatship has a life, and their life is not suffering. So what's the difference? That's what the Buddha came to tell us. The Buddha didn't tell us that everything that lives suffers, period. No. The Buddha achieved enlightenment and didn't just die. The Buddha's now Dharmakaya and Sambhogakaya and Nirmanakaya, a person, not an inanimate object, a person who evolved from a state like me. So the Buddha came and said, This is the superior truth of suffering. And then there's ways that we can lay all these out, the 8 sufferings and the 6 sufferings, but the 3 sufferings are really what it all boils down to. The suffering of suffering, the pain, we know what that is, headaches, pain, major losses. It just hurts. It feels so bad. We experience this, the general thing when we think of pain. This is a suffering of suffering. The suffering of craniotomy, great example. The pain after a craniotomy is the suffering of suffering and caused by non-virtue. And one would argue, caused by not believing in karma in a previous life. Has to be. Did something in a previous, didn't believe something that was true to be true. Wrong view is not believing something true is true. So then we know what that is. But the suffering of change is tricky. It's all the stuff around us we think will make us happy. But I just said, and you just agreed, I think, I was pretty convincing that it's dissatisfying. So these things I think are happy, I don't even need to say anything more. They're not, right? They aren't, because they aren't always that way. The kind of happy I'm looking for doesn't turn into a bomb going off. The kind of happy I'm looking for isn't, oh, I love you, Dad, and then he dies. The kind of happy I'm looking for is the one where I always feel the happy with the situation. I'm not looking for it to have like a bomb in it that makes it turn into something that wouldn't have been so bad if it hadn't happened in the first place. If what hadn't happened in the first place? The happiness. If that thing that was so happy hadn't happened in the first place, you wouldn't have this intense amount of suffering. So the happiness has within it this suffering that it's going to transform into. And what is it about it that's so alluring? It's just like bait, as Geshe Dorje Damdu says. I think that's such a great way to put it. And I just recently saw this in another text, one of the Indian Pandits' texts. Usually Geshe Dorje Damdu is saying something that's in the Indian Pandits' texts very, very skillfully. It's amazing when we look at his teachings on the turnings of the wheel of Dharma and the third turning of the wheel of Dharma. That's right out of Lama Tsongkhapa's Essence of Eloquence, the beginning section. Really, really beautiful. But anyway, so we have this thing we think's happiness, but we just said it's not, right? It's not really. I mean, if it's a fleeting happiness, oh, it's happy for that moment. Which of the moments? Was it happiest before you got it when you were like, oh, I'm about to get this thing I really want? And did it downgrade from there? Where was the happy part? Pinpoint it for me and then tell me where the downgrade started and tell me if that one moment of the happy point that was the highest point that everything else stunk in comparison to was worth the 1,000 moments after the one moment that stunk. You got to meditate. You got to see if it's true or not. This is the Buddha discovered. You can discover it, see if it's true. Look at your own life. Look at your daily, hour by hour. What am I trying to do? Am I just trying to be here to get, no, you're trying to not suffer and you're trying to be happy. Well, is it working? Is it a foolproof plan? Is it a foolproof plan, what you're doing? So then the third type of suffering is the thing that makes it all go down. It's this being forced beyond our control into a set of aggregates among 4 or 5 because of our contaminated karma's afflictions and their active seeds. And we're out of control. We're just being forced. When I die, I'm going to be forced into another birth, out of my control, forced, 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 out of my control until I take control. But I haven't taken control yet. Since beginningless time, I'm still here. I prove it to you. I'm right here with 3 types of suffering. Right here. I got them all. I've had all of them today. All of them. Full stop. So since beginningless time, I haven't stopped it. I sound pretty adept at stopping it at this point. Will I? Will you? You know what I'm talking about. You know the Four Noble Truths. Are you applying them to your mind enough to start to say, yeah, no, all of this stuff is salt water? Or is it, yeah, all this stuff is salt water. May I have another glass or 2? Because it definitely is, but it isn't. It is, but it isn't. That's what we do all the time. It is, but it isn't. It's like a dream, but it's real. It's like a dream, but it's like real. He said like a dream. It's not a dream. It's an unconventional dream. It's real, but the way we see it isn't real. And I've just got to like kind of fix a couple of my things up, and then it's all going to work out. And I'll get to that happiness that I can't seem to, that slippery pig with the Vaseline on it. You know, it seems like happiness is just as elusive as emptiness. And we have a lot better chance at happiness if we could just figure out how we just grab one of the slippery pigs. Just, you know, figure out the emptiness, and then we'll get the happiness. We don't have to keep missing it. So we keep getting forced into these aggregates. Why? Why is this happening? Why is this happening over and over and over again? Self-grasping ignorance. I believe that I inherently exist. I believe that everything other than me inherently exists. I believe you inherently exist. I believe that chair inherently exists. And at a sensory level, it's being projected in that way. So I have like no shot until I can change the way that I think to see if appearances tally with reality. Because even once I come to the conclusion that they don't, and even if I were to see emptiness, until I become a Buddha, when I come out of seeing emptiness, it's still going to all appear to be truly existent and inherently existent. I'll know better as an Arya, but unless I'm an Arya Buddha, I will not be able to cognize the non-inherent existence of conventional reality from an appearance level until I'm a Buddha. And that is caused by what's called an obstruction to omniscience. You know, even if you're an arhat, you're going to have these, and you're not a Buddha arhat, you're going to have these appearances that occur conventionally when you're you know, observing conventional phenomena and not engaging in ultimate analysis. The conventional phenomena will appear to be truly existent until you get rid of the stains that the Buddhas gets rid of. So, you know, we have this self-grasping ignorance that we believe everything inherently exists because it sure looks like it, sure seems like it. It's so solid out there, just so solid and standing on its own, standing itself up, I feel, just over there without any of my participation. And then the Buddha came to say, no, this is from your side. It's a projection. There's externality, but it's merely designated in dependence upon a collection that makes it exist conventionally. That thought designation, that's its findability conventionally. That makes it existent in conventional terms. It's an object that can be found by valid conventional analysis. And that there'll be an agreement upon conventionally. We'll agree upon certain things. The world will agree that these labels are good. And then we'll see them as objects that are inseparable from their label, that are the true reference of their labels. But they're not. They're merely designated in dependence upon a collection. They're merely a projection. It's like an illusion. It's like being created from the subject, but it looks like it's only from the object. But the subject is making it a chair or making it a house. If a bug lives under the cup dome of the chair for the bug, you know, there's just look at all of these possibilities. You know, an elephant isn't going to sit in that. You just see it. It's a small chair. Elephant's not going to say, oh, there's somewhere for me to sit. It's merely from the subject. In the elephant's world, they would agree that's not somewhere for them to sit. And they'd all be right in their world. And all the bugs living under there, they would agree there's a house there. They'd be right. And I say there's a chair. You would too. We'd be right. But we'd be right conventionally, and inherently there's no chair. When we subject it to ultimate analysis, we won't be able to find the thing that we're referring to with a label. So we got to undo that. We have to figure out exactly what that means. And we're not going to do that tonight, but try to figure out if things are as they appear. And the way that we try to start to hash it out is looking at the great texts like Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, the 3rd volume in English. We're so fortunate to have it, illuminating the intent. Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on Chandrakirti's entrance to the middle way is so clear and presented just so wonderfully. And just there's so many other texts that we can say we have our access to. All of the, Nagarjuna's texts and Arya Deva's texts and Shanti Deva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. We have all of these texts that will help us, and we have these incredible scholars that can help us to sort out the Madhyamaka Prasangika view, because we won't do it on our own, and we'll think we have it when we don't, and we'll think we have it and then lose it. And if you don't lose it and you think you have it, you're probably not making progress. You're even Jeffrey Hopkins, and I heard Geshe Damdu, you're going to fall into nihilism. Geshe Damdu made the example, I think, that he said his teacher drew a line on a pillowcase or something, right? Piece of paper, pillowcase, I think it was a sheet, and a marble, and drew a line down the middle and said, make it land on the line. He had this thing, make it land right on the line. Don't let it roll off the line. And this is trying to find the middle way that's free from absolutism and nihilism, where you don't have these extremes with these big words now they're using. Maximalist reduction and a minimalist inadequacy. This is the new term, apparently. I had to learn. These are the two extremes where you've taken away too much and you're a nihilist, or you've left too much there and you're finding things to be truly existent. And the middle way view is in between there. And the middle way view is the only thing that acts as an antidote to that thing I just told you causes pervasive compounded suffering, the 3rd type of suffering. So the first type of suffering, pain. Suffering of change, the thing you think is happiness, we all agree upon, kind of stinks. Pervasive compounded suffering is being forced into this position again, where you get to, as a door prize, experience among the 8 types of suffering, 6 types of suffering, or at least you have this pervasive compounded suffering that says there's more in the bank in your next life, even if you don't experience among the 8 or 6 or the first 2, because you're in a formless realm. If you still have self-grasping ignorance, you're going to be forced into something other than that state of concentration, that blissful state, even if you're at the peak of cyclic existence, and you'll be forced into a position again where you do have among those other types of suffering. If the self-grasping ignorance hasn't been gotten rid of, then the inappropriate attention will happen, then the afflictions, coarse afflictions will occur, and then you're going to have contaminated karmas that cause more of samsara. You're going to have the anger arise again. You're going to have the attachment arise again, which is then going to force you into positions where you create non-virtue, which causes the suffering of suffering and causes the lower realms of cyclic existence. So we have to figure out if the origin of all of this disaster is the self-grasping ignorance, and the self-grasping ignorance give rise to karma and afflictions. When we look at the Lamrim Chemo, it says, the origin of suffering is karma and afflictions, and then the more extensive explanation is the 12 links of dependent origination. And we see the first link is this ignorance. And if we can somehow smash that link, then none of they don't occur. You get rid of ignorance, you get rid of karma, you get rid of the consciousness, you get rid of the name and form, and you get rid of the 6 sources, and you get rid of contact and feeling and craving and clinging or attachment and potential existence, becoming and birth and aging and birth and then aging and death. You get rid of all those things if you don't have the one thing that started the problem. It all just collapses if you don't have the cause. If you don't have a seed, you're not going to get an apple tree. And if you don't have a seed planted in the ground with the water and all, nothing's going to occur. You have to have causes and conditions, all composite phenomena, all impermanent, all composite things are impermanent. So if something's impermanent, it's necessarily caused. Everything that's impermanent is both a cause and effect, and an effect. So we have to figure out how to get rid of that which gives rise to a result if we don't want the result. You don't want an apple tree, don't plant a seed. You don't want suffering of 8 types of, if you don't want birth, aging, sickness, and death, suffering of separating from the pleasant, meeting with the unpleasant, not getting what you want, and the suffering of the appropriated aggregates, then don't create that which gives rise to those things. The Buddha said. You don't want uncertainty. You don't want to shuck off bodies. You don't want this rebirth. You don't want to ascend to the high to the low. You don't want this dissatisfaction. You don't want, to have to not have friends. You don't want to be alone all the time. Get rid of what causes that aloneness. Get rid of what causes uncertainty. Get rid of what causes having to go from the high to the low. Get rid of those things. And the Buddha was so kind to tell us how. And the Buddha said, if you get rid of those things, it all ends. You separate from that suffering because it's not your nature. Your mind isn't in the nature of grasping at true establishment. Your mind is empty of inherent existence. Therefore, it's not stuck. Just like the Buddha's mind was empty of inherent existence when he was Prince Siddhartha, or before whatever life story Buddha principle you abide by. At some point, Buddha had a mind that was grasping at true existence, and then, because it was empty of inherent existence, could change it, could convert ignorance to wisdom, just like us. So it can cease if we separate from the causes that gives rise to it. And how do we do that? By relying upon the path. So we're so fortunate that we have this path that the Buddha taught us to rely upon, the Eightfold Path, the path of the wisdom realizing emptiness, and to understand how to go about becoming a Buddha through the 5 paths, the path of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, and no more learning, and how all of these things work together, how from the basis of renunciation and concentration, the Mahayana path emerges with bodhicitta, and then one is on the path of accumulation and then can achieve the state of no more learning, of Buddhahood, where the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience are no more. We're so fortunate that we have all of these teachings. So getting rid of the self-grasping ignorance alone will only allow us to achieve nirvana and achieve an abiding nirvana. Not only, that's pretty magnificent, never suffering again, but it will only allow us to achieve that state, which is ejecting from samsara. So if we get rid of our self-grasping ignorance, the afflictive obstructions go away. Now we're ejected from samsara. And if we've done nothing more than that, then we're going to be in an abiding nirvana of a hero, a solitary realizer. And that's great. We don't suffer. But okay, I'm not suffering right now. I'm not suffering right now, and I have bliss, the highest amount of bliss I could ever have. Different. So the difference here is that not only did the Buddha realize the trick was to get rid of this ignorance that then gave rise to this inappropriate attention and gave rise to the coarse self-cherishing attitude. Because if you're not grasping at self, the coarse, I'm the most important, goes away. But the Buddha said the real trick was to be able to love and have love and compassion for every single sentient being who's in the exact same condition I just went over for the last half hour. And when we look at our world, there's definitely at this very moment people we don't want to have all that stuff I just mentioned. And when we do a bigger meditation on beginningless lives, and we start to look at things more realistically, and we stop believing things that don't exist, and things that exist don't exist, and we can switch that around. We start to see, since beginningless time, we've had these relationships, and I've cared about every being in the universe at some point in time or another, as much as I care about the person that I'm saying I couldn't imagine having to experience this 30-minute talk. So when we start to apply the 7-point cause and effect from Buddha Shakyamuni to Asanga, from Maitreya and Asanga, and we start to apply equalizing, exchanging self with others, passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri, Nagarjuna, and Shantideva, and we learn how to marry these two practices, it starts to make our minds tally with the reality that we've cared for everyone and everyone's cared for us the way that we care for the people we don't want to have experience all this stuff we just talked about. We've had this caring for every single being in the universe. Every single being in the universe we've cared for, they've cared for us in the same powerful, strong way that we feel about the closest ones we have to us. So the Buddha advises us to do this meditation on, establishing this understanding. So at least we're playing with a full deck of cards. At least we know what the real reality is. And then we can make our own decisions. We can make our own decisions. If we say, hey, the person I love the most in this world, they shouldn't be free from suffering. They should have 8 sufferings. They should have 6 sufferings. It's just me that shouldn't. I don't think you'll say that. And this is where the Mahayana begins. You start to spread that thought out to all the people that you felt this way about and forgotten. Because since beginningless time, you've had these relationships, but our karma just clouds us. Our minds are so just tight with this self-cherishing attitude. Our mind's nature is just to flow freely to all phenomena, but it's just covered up with these afflictive obstructions to omniscience. And it's like Geshe Dorje Damdu says, it's like a gymnast that's in a spacesuit. A gymnast that could just flow and dance and spring and handstand, but they're in a spacesuit. And our mind could be so free and just so, go everywhere spontaneously to take care of everyone in a blissful state. But it doesn't. Because we cherish ourselves more than others, because we grasp at the self as being inherently existent. Banish the one to blame for everything. And this that Geshe Chikawa says, it's a self-cherishing attitude at the root of the self-grasping ignorance. It's at the root of the self-cherishing attitude that causes this mess that we're in. Everything, in the Guru Puja, all of the terrible things that occur in the world are from this chronic disease of the self-cherishing attitude. All the Shantideva, all the good things that occur from cherishing others, all the terrible things that occur from cherishing ourselves. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas cherish others. We cherish ourselves. Look at the difference. Look at the difference in the description. We go to descriptions of things. Description of Jeff. I know Jeff. So you make your own description of yourself, and then a description of a Buddha, the founder, transcendent destroyer, the one thus gone, foe destroyer. I haven't destroyed the enemy of my afflictions, and boy, are they my enemy, because when they come up, they disturb my mind. So Buddha was right. An affliction is a disturbance of the mind. When I don't get what I want and I'm craving it, boy, is my mind disturbed. When I hate something and it won't get out of my way, boy, is my mind disturbed. Everything around me seems inherently existent. Boy, is my mind disturbed. There's just a hum of my mind not tallying with reality. And it's true. If you just listen for a minute, you'll see that discontent is a hum of things not tallying with reality. Your mind doesn't want to be fooled. That's why the only thing you can see directly is emptiness in reality. That's it for another time. So invite all sentient beings here to be our guests, to be able to hear this question and answer session that we're going to have, and, to be able to benefit from the questions and maybe have questions answered that they need answered. We invite all sentient beings, all hell, hungry, ghost, animal, human, demigods, and gods here, and in their individual languages, imagine that all these questions and answers are being transformed so that they can, really benefit. And now that we have all sentient beings here, imagine that we invite the entire merit field here, that we invite all of the holy beings here, imagining Buddha Shakyamuni and right in the space in front of us, who came and was so kind to turn the wheel of Dharma and the 3 specific turnings of the wheel. So fortunate. Imagine Buddha Shakyamuni there. Imagine all the holy gurus, all of your lamas who are inseparable from the Buddhas. Imagining Khenser Geshe Wandak, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. His Holiness the Dalai Lama on a jeweled throne supported by snow lions, solid as a Vajra, diamond strong, going nowhere, the wish-fulfilling jewel in the world, Chenrezig in person, right in the space in front of you, imagining Geshe Lobsang Gompo Rinpoche, and imagining Demo Loche Rinpoche and Khenser Lobsang Gyatso, imagining Geshe Dorje Damdu, Umzala Geshe Aga, Geshe Mala Tenzin Ladrin, Jeffrey Hopkins, Lama Alan Wallace, imagining all these beings, any being, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, any being that you consider a holy being, that you've had contact with, that you consider inseparable from a Buddha, or you consider as part of a merit field as a Bodhisattva, however you relate, whatever will make you feel the blessings of these beings, to be able to help enhance our practice so that they hear the questions that we have and maybe can intervene in our lives tomorrow morning in some way to help us to clarify these questions. This is what an omniscient being can do. So when we invoke the merit field, they come here, we just can't see them, but they're here. And when we're invoking them, we're saying, we need your guidance. We're looking for each and every one of you. Khenser Rinpoche and His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Geshe Dorje Damdu, please help guide us in ways that we can't understand, in hidden ways that we can't understand. Come help guide us. Asking the extensive deeds lineage and the profound view lineage, passed down from extensive deeds lineage, Buddha Shakyamuni and Maitreya, down through Asanga and Basu Bandhu and Dharmakirti and Dignaga and Vimuktasena and Haribhadra and Shakyaprabha and Gunaprabha and Lama Salingpa and Lord Atisha, all these holy beings in the extensive deed lineage, profound view lineage, passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri and Nagarjuna and Buddha Palita and Aryadeva and Chandrakirti and Shantideva and Chandrashita and Baba Vega and Kamala Shila, all these holy beings in this lineage, passed down in the profound view, and Lama Salimpa there again, and Lord Atisha, and the lineage of blessings from Lord Vajradhara to Saraha and Machipa and Talopa and Naropa and Lotsawa Marpa and Jetsun Milarepa and Gampopa, all of these holy beings who help us to understand how to realize the nature of our minds. So fortunate. Atisha passing down the Lamrim lineage to Dron Tompa and the 3 old Kadampa lineages, and the Nyingma, Kaju, Sakya, and Galup lineages, Padmasambhava and Satya Kunga Nimpo, Sakya Pandita and Randawa, imagining the Karmapas and so forth, imagining the Galupa lineage, Lama Tsongkhapa, Kirtupje, Jelsupje, Panchen Sanandrapa, Jayan Sheba, Basuchuji Jetson, Janja Rupi Dorje, Gonchu Jimmy Wampo, the 7th Dalai Lama, all of these holy beings who've come to this world to elucidate the Dharma, highest Yoga Tantra deities, performance Tantra deity, action Tantra deities, all of the 35 Buddhas, the protectors, they're all here to be a witness to our event here, and with all sentient beings here, and with all of the gurus, lamas, and Buddhas, lamas who are Buddhas in the space in front of us, imagining all of these holy beings. Let's now recite the Heart Sutra mantra 7 times. And the Heart Sutra mantra contains the essence of the entire Heart Sutra. We see that implicitly, the Heart Sutra teaches the 5 paths, the path of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, and no more learning, and explicitly teaches the wisdom realizing emptiness, the emptiness of inherent existence of all phenomena. It's showing that nothing is established by way of its own character. So this is the teaching that explicitly was given at the 2nd turning of the wheel of Dharma. And when we recite this mantra, we think about the 5 paths and the emptiness of inherent existence of the 5 paths. And we imagine this mantra is being sent out to all sentient beings, and their minds are being blessed with these paths that allow them to realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness that has as its foundation and need a concentrated mind. Te ata om gate gate parasangate bodhi swaha. Te ata om gate gate parasangate bodhi swaha. Te ata om 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 gate parasangate bodhi swaha. Teata om gate parasangate bodhi svaha. And now, just out of respect, request for teaching. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Sanje Jadan Zoji Janan La, Janju Badu Dani Jazuji, Dagi Juji Bezonanji, Jola Benche Sanje Dubasho, Sanje Jadan Zoji Janan La, Janju Badu Dani Jazuji, Dagi Juji Bezonanji, Jola Benche Sanje Dubasho, Sanje Jadan Zoji Janan La, Janju Badu Dani Jazuji, Dagi Juji Bezonanji, Jola Benche Sanje Dubasho. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha, Gautama, I pay homage. And that's from Nagarjuna's Mulya Madhyamika Karika, the end salutation verses. And from Sache Kunga Nyingpo, if you are attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you are attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. Okay, so we'll open the question and answer. I'm on Zoom. I'm also, just for folks on Facebook to know, I went to the eye doctor today, and eyes are dilated from the process, so I can kind of read. So I'm going to do my best. I see there's some questions that are on Facebook, so I'll try my best. On the side of the road. I'll have to touch it to see the whole entire thing. I wish you were on Zoom. Yeah, Alessandra, a longtime student of Rinpoche. I can't get to it to see the whole question. Yeah, unfortunately. I can only see you're asking about reciting mantras for animals you see killed on the side of the road. Maybe if you could just write the question, just the second part of the question again, so that it's not as long, then I can read the rest of it and be able to answer your question. But in the meantime, I'll take questions from the Zoom. So does anybody have a question?
Jeff?
Michael, questions? Sure.
Yeah, Jeff, I have a question. So I remember reading this I think it was in a commentary on the Shantideva Guide. It said that the self-grasping ignorance is felt most strongly during times of extreme fear or attachment. An example given, if one was about to fall off a cliff, would be the very, very intense feeling, I am going to fall off the cliff. The sense of independent self is very pronounced in that moment. My question is, and this relates to the 51 mental factors described in the Abhidharma.
Okay.
The self-grasping ignorance, is that deeper than the 51 mental factors? Is that a more pervasive quality of ignorance that pervades everything else, and that is continuous in some way?
Well,
deep sleep?
Let me break that question down into a couple things. If you could just mute when
Sure.
Let me break it down, and if I satisfy you with an answer, let me know. If I don't, then I may not. But that's a great question, and I think that I can address it in some ways. So first of all, when you establish the object of negation, when you are trying to find out how does the I appear to me, a lot of times you find examples of imagining the I that's being accused. because it becomes very, very prominent. Becomes very, very prominent when you're subjected to something like an accusation. You're being accused of something. You feel the sense of, and especially if it's, as Lori was saying, wrongly accused, this idea, who, me? Not me? So similarly, when we experience fright, when we experience jarring things, that's when we can really identify this self-grasping ignorance, this thing that appears to us to be concrete, as it says in Meditation on Emptiness in the beginning. The yogi first engages in this meditation where he or she sees, how is the I appearing to me? Is it appearing not inherently existent? Is it appearing to be subjective? Is it appearing, we ask ourselves, does it appear as a mere designation, or does it appear as something concrete that exists from its own side? And then when we see, in a case of being really scared, or imagining in our meditation we're being wrongly accused, that I that comes out suddenly has a lot of different things about it. It seems like it's separate, but then it seems like it's right in me right here. So it seems like it does this thing even without getting into an analysis too far that doesn't make much sense. Well, it's me over here, but no, this is me, my body. And then it starts to not make sense before you even do any analysis. So I think it's the fifth Dalai Lama that says that until you identify this, you're never going to be able to start to knock down, what it is, this I that's able to, this object that's able to stand on its own, to stand itself up, that doesn't need any support subjectively whatsoever. It doesn't need any support from the aggregates whatsoever. This thing that's findable, that is either got to be findable within these aggregates that I just said, no, this is me, or findable as something separate from. Because I started saying, no, I own this, but this is me. Well, if I own it, it's separate. I could be separate as an owner or something. I'd have to be able to find this thing that's separatable from the parts. Or I'd have to find it here in the parts. So the investigation begins, Michael, with what you're saying, is that it really comes out and becomes prominent to us, that we feel there's this thing that stands on its own or stands inside. We have this feeling that comes from our improper discrimination. When you're talking about the mental factors, the omnipresent mental factors, there's 5. And we have this thing where we come into contact with an object, we pay attention to it, and then we discriminate it in a certain way. And when we discriminate the I as being inherently existent, then we feel a certain way. We have a feeling. Shantideva is always talking about this feeling that's causing us to have all of our intentions. So at the root of all of the negative non-virtues, when we're looking at it from the mental factor perspective, that ignorance, which is the ignorance that grasps that thing as being intrinsically existent, causes the other coarse afflictions. So there's lots of ignorance. There's ignorance about karma and effects. There's ignorance about this, ignorance about that. But there's one specific ignorance that's the driver of all the other stuff that's wrong. And it's the self-grasping ignorance. And from that self-grasping ignorance, as I said before, there's an inappropriate attention that takes place. It's inappropriate because it's paying attention to something that doesn't exist and giving it value, and then making decisions based on a wrong idea. So yeah, at the root, at the core of the whole problem is the self-grasping ignorance, that then from this misperception of the I and other phenomena, self of person and self of phenomena as being inherently existent, then I've assigned the value to all the inherently existent things, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. And then I go for the things that I want and I punch the things I don't want. And that's all karma I'm creating that's contaminated, that gives rise to cyclic existence. So yes. So, and among the, when we look at the negative, we look at mental factors and we look at ignorance, we find that the self-grasping ignorance is at the root of, it blossoms the tree of all of the other problems. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes, Jeff. No, yes, that was excellent. Thank you. Just quickly, that self-grasping ignorance, that would be continuous for the dreaming and even deep sleep states. Maybe
Yes.
taking a bit of a break
Never gives you a break. Never
That's
get,
right.
because of
That's
the
right.
obstructions to omniscience. It's since the latent predispositions that have been firmly set since from our beginningless attachment to things being intrinsically existent, and from this kind of these latent predispositions that are firmly placed from our attachment to things being intrinsically existent, these imprints give rise to mistaken, dualistic, erroneous appearances that then, what does that mean? It makes us think that things intrinsically exist when they don't intrinsically exist. All the time, 24/7, 7 days a week, until you're a Buddha, unless you're seeing emptiness directly, even if you're in a bodhisattva on the 8th ground, 9th ground, if you're not seeing emptiness directly, you're still perceiving everything to be inherently existent from an appearance level. You're not apprehending it, you know better, but it appears the way that it does 24/7 to you, to a 9th ground bodhisattva when they're not seeing emptiness. It maybe doesn't appear the same, but you get my point. The appearances still seem to be there's an appearance of inherent existence that's been kind of firmly set, suffused, stained. The afflictive obstructions, the self-grasping ignorance have stained our mind. And this stain causes things to appear intrinsically existent. It's in the end of the Lamrim Chemo. You'll find the definition of the self-grasping ignorance to be grasping at things as being intrinsically existent, the grasping, the cognitive state, and then the obstructions to omniscience. So those are afflictive obstructions, and then the obstructions to omniscience, or the cognitive obscurations. Those give rise to the false appearance of things being intrinsically existent. So yeah, we never stop seeing things, even in a dream. So in a dream, we're fooled twice.
That's right. That's right. Well, very good, Jeff. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, back to, yes, Alessandra, should I be visualizing the image of Buddha top two, or just repeating the mantra for safety? Ooh, Rinpoche always, this is something Rinpoche said to me. So here I can give you exact instructions from Rinpoche. Rinpoche said, when you're driving, you can meditate on dependent origination. Am I driving? What is driving? When did I start driving? And what does it take to make driving? It takes a road, a driver, and a car. And he said that you can say mantras for the animals on the side of the road, and you can try to develop love and compassion for them, and think of death and impermanence as you go by cemeteries, and use everything in your visual field to help you to practice the Dharma. But first and foremost, don't crash the car. Does that make sense? So I don't think you can really visualize. I don't know. Like visualizing, we're trying to really, when we look at fixed meditation, or we're trying to really think about that with our mind, we wouldn't, I don't know, everybody's different. So I don't want to give them any more advice than Rinpoche gave. You know your own mind. And I would be safety first, because you need this human basis. This human basis is so precious. We can take the essence from it, and we can become free from cyclic existence altogether. We can become Buddhas and not only be free from cyclic existence altogether, but experience bliss 24/7. And other states that aren't this human basis are nowhere near as conducive to making that happen as this. And we need to study. We need to be able to engage in an analysis, and we need to be able to meditate. So be wise with your practice. Don't try to do things that don't make sense to try to get more bang for the buck, because the Buddha was a logical person. The Buddha would say, watch the road, think of compassion, think of may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. I can totally do that and drive. May all sentient beings be free, because I can sing a song on the radio. So I feel safe with may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering, the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that knows no suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. All sentient beings want happiness just like me. May they have happiness. The downfalls. So these are the kind of things that we can do, but don't get too carried away with it to the point where it's distracting you from your primary goal, which is getting from point A to point B safely. That's the primary goal. And anything else you can do in between that goal spiritually, every moment that we can pack spirituality into it is a moment well used, but use them wisely, if that makes sense. Any other questions? And Michael, that was a great question. And that 9th chapter is something that in this lifetime I would only pray to be able to understand. And I'm actually studying Shantideva now with Umzala Geshe Aga almost every day, a little bit at a time. And I'm actually quite scared to get to the 9th chapter, to be frank. But I know it needs to be done, and I know that I need to clarify all of those views within mind only and non-Buddhist traditions, and try to figure out what that middle way view is, because once you see the object of negation, you see emptiness, and I haven't yet. So great question,
Jeff,
Michael.
I don't mean to hog the platform. If I have a brief follow-up question, if nobody else has a question.
Sure. And then I got about 5, just hold me to it. Somebody raise your hand in 5 minutes and tell me to stop, because I want to end at 8:30 and try as close to it as possible. It probably won't be true, but it'll be like 5 after, but I'd like to be as close to that as possible. So in 5 minutes, somebody ring a bell and tell me to stop, and we'll dedicate. And we can do more questions in another time. Go for it, Michael.
All right. So actually, I don't remember where this comes from. I've heard it multiple times. I don't know which text it's from, but it said that in terms of perception, that like a human being will see a basis of designation, like water. A human being will see it as something to drink, and a deva, a heavenly being, see it as nectar. The hungry ghost will see it as some putrid, foul liquid. A hell being will see it as molten lava or something like that. So the same basis of designation perceived by different minds according to different karmic situations differently. First of all, where does that come from? And that it's not. It has a Chitamatrin sort of feel to it, but I don't know for sure.
Well, one thing that proves is that the object doesn't exist within its basis of designation inherently. Because if it did, it couldn't be those 3 different subjective things. So we start there, first of all. So all of this stuff can, because it's empty of intrinsic existence, it's empty of inherently being chair. It can be house also. Like the example I gave, it could be a house for a bug. You can't see the chair, but it's got a space under it for something could live. But for an elephant, he or she wouldn't perceive it as a chair. It's way too small. So where does that come from? That comes from the karma that, they're projecting karma. We'll start there. You're projecting karma at the time of death, throws you into the particular realm of existence that you're abiding in. And you perceive things according to the way of that kind of being would perceive them. Now, karma is a lot more difficult to begin to sort out than emptiness, the Buddha said. But we can use the tools Tsongkhapa gives us and other great masters give us to try to kind of extrapolate it to get to the point of what the Buddha was getting at. But karma and how it works and why it works the way that it does is very complex and has so many different causes and conditions. But for whatever reason, at the time of death, you created some kind of mental attitude of attachment to something, some way or something that propelled you into a way of thinking, a way of being, a way of thinking and being, if that makes sense. And the way of being will be connected to the way of thinking, and the way of thinking will be connected to the way of being. So an animal's way of being is going to think like an animal. So if you're projected into an animal birth, you're going to think like an animal. If you're projected into a hell birth, you're going to think like a hell being. And everyone around you who's an animal is going to think like an animal or a hell being, because you're all been projected into this same state of basis and way of thinking. Relating to yourself from the perspective of an animal, the I then becomes from the perspective of an animal. The I is then merely designated upon the aggregates that are animal. And the aggregates that are animal contain animal consciousness. So that I then is referring to this being that has a kind of consciousness that is within a certain kind of perspective, because the basis that it's from has that perspective. And a whole bunch of 8 billion of us, this is where it's going to get tricky, and you're not going to get your answer. And I've asked this answer 112,000 question that you've asked me a lot of times. And I'm not going to probably land on where you want me to. So we're projecting a basis that is us, and it's in a specific realm that has a consciousness that projects things in a certain way. And if it's a hungry ghost, it's seeing pus. And if it's a god, it's seeing nectar. And if it's me, it's seeing water. Because I've been projected into a human basis that has a human consciousness. And in a human basis with a human consciousness, that thing's water. And my neighbor sees it as water, because they've also been projected from their last life into a human basis that has a consciousness that's a human, that sees it as this. But then there's wind. This is where you're not going to like my answer. You're not going to like it. I'm going to give it to you, though.
Go for it.
Sensor Rinpoche. So what is it, Rinpoche? What is it over there? What's over there? Is it pus? Is it blood? Is it nectar? What's the Buddha see? And he said, a little pus, a little blood, and a little nectar, depending on the wind, projecting it. Because it isn't intrinsically any of it, per se, right?
I was going to ask, what is its intrinsic nature?
It isn't. It has no intrinsic nature. It's only the Buddha experiences it as nectar, right? Or as bliss or as whatever, because that's what the Buddha projects. The Buddha is projecting. In a way, not projecting in a conventional conceptual way. Don't let me say it like that. But the Buddha's experience is dependent origination. That's a better way to say that. The Buddha's experience of bliss is dependent origination. The Buddha's consciousness has been created by the ingredients that make a Buddha's consciousness that experience things the way a Buddha does. There isn't some something else going on for the Buddha that's outside of the law of the way that things work. The Buddha is just going from no suffering to no suffering, bliss to bliss, because the Buddha's mind is clearly, illuminatingly knowing just that and doesn't have anything
There would be
else
no
to know.
negative. Yeah, there'd
Go
be no
ahead.
negative imprints to distort the basis of designation. It would.
Correct.
Would it be? Yeah.
Correct. The Buddha is the
It'd be,
only one
yeah.
who has no imprints that distort the perception when not seeing emptiness.
Mhm.
Correct.
Hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, so a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I asked Jeffrey Hopkins, and he said, "Well, isn't it obvious?" So that was his answer. But I'm going to keep asking. I have one more person that I'm going to ask when I get a real serious time to ask this. I'm going to make sure that they can't get out of the room.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask them, and I'm going to really make sure I'm satisfied. But that's the answer I have for you tonight.
Oh, very good, Jeff. Thank you.
All right, everybody, let's this was really great. I love this because it, do you know your stuff or not? Ready, go. And it allows me to think about the questions that you asked, which, you don't usually, when you have a question and answer session, those aren't the first questions. And I rejoice in the fact that those are the first questions. It means that you really, really listen to Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche. You said there's 500 teachings online, and you said you've watched them. I believe you. It sounds like it. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Zandrapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Any mistakes that I've made, may they be purified by Vajrasattva mantra. May your body, speech, and mind be purified as mine. But specifically any mistakes that I may have made, because I don't have all the answers. I'm just doing the best to convey to you what's helped me change my mind and the little bit I know about the Dharma so far. So I could have very easily made a mistake. I don't remember making it, but if I did, may it be purified by this mantra. Om benzo sato samayamane balaya benzo sato zina vajita dita meva zulgaya meva zubgaya meva anurag meva savazini meva jazava gama suju make jam shuyan kuru ha bhagavan zavata kata benzo mom benzo bama mahasamaya sapa ah hum fe. May we always be protected by Paul and Lama. Jo Rama, Jo Rama, Jo Rama, Tunjo, Rulo, Rulo, Hong, Jo, Hong. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the three times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso. Please remain until samsara's end. And a prayer of supplication to Rinpoche. I think I know it enough to wing it. A complex yogi poses as a simple monk. I mean, because of my eyes being dilated from the eye thing today. A complex yogi poses as a simple monk. Homage to Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Aryatara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music purified by Om 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 Om. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you, who placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like Atisha, who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. The teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar from our ears that elucidated the teachings for beings of three capacities. Now that sound has stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all your teachers passed away and understood this sadness, entreating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It is by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. The sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. And before I end, Michael, I wanted to say one more very important thing. The reason it's not mind-only view is because of this point of wind. Madhyamaka Prasangika posits externality. Mind-only school does not posit externality, but Prasangika does. So just wherever it's been explained to me, it's like this: the wind is throwing this combined collective experience. And that's why there's a little of this, a little of mine, a little of my neighbors, a little of Lori's, and somehow we're subjectively experiencing this thing that's external, but subjective. This is what we have to figure out. And it's a very, very, very hard task. And I rejoice in you.
That's very subtle. That's very subtle. Yeah.
Very, very, very subtle. Projection. A projector isn't, coming from the screen, but it's inseparable from the screen when the movie gets there. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So it's throwing it onto a screen, but it's on the screen externally. It's not behind you. Okay. Bye-bye. Keep a virtuous mind this week.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much. Tashi delay.
Tashi